I know teachers right now are into their 40s who are still paying college loans off.
The people that aren't in education complain about what we're not doing in education. You're like, all right, so the people that are doing cool stuff, you almost have borderline a moral obligation to say, all right, this is what I'm doing then.
If you don't have a plan, okay, right, wait for it, you're going to be poor.
Like, be lazy. Well, if I'm training people to be teachers, be lazy. Yeah, shut up and let them do it.
There's two emotions that I straddle, right? Is hope and worry. So I'm worried to death about kids, but I'm super hopeful about the future.
Education wants the instant gratification. They want the weeds. They don't want the trees.
CTE is coming gangbusters for the traditional, practitioners who don't want to even entertain moving things around for the sake of efficacy.
Do we need as much time as we need to do school?
I mean, if you're asking a 14-year-old, they're going to tell you a weekend would be fine. But no, I want to challenge kids.
If you're about to listen to this podcast, buckle up.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome back to the Disrupt Education Podcast. I got Alli Dahl here with me. I'm Peter Hostrawser. Hey, Alli, what's happening?
Oh, man, we are once again going to disrupt our own podcast.
Sure.
We're going to do something. I got to let the people know this is something we've never done. I don't think you've even did it before I joined the podcast, which when this comes out, it'll be almost 3 years. That's crazy. We've brought, and you've brought guests back, like after a year or two, sometimes like 3, 4, 5 years, but we've never brought a guest back in like 2 months. But we already disrupted our podcast the last time we had this guest on. If you didn't listen to those episodes, you're going to want to. We're going to dive into more topics here, but we're just surprised. We're bringing Jason back.
Jason Van Nus is with us, man. Jason, how you doing?
Man, I'm great. Such an honor to be back.
Starting off the day, I just want to give people kind of a picture of what was going on, and this is where this thing's going. I'm going to put this out there, man, because I think this is great. This is how passionate and how curious we are as educators. I'm on a text run with Alli and Jason is arguing with ChatGPT. All right, I know that's very surface level, and you're going to have to explain that. But the narrative is kind of where we're going to go today. All right, Jason, what was the argument? And then let's just start diving into the terms and the words that we're using here.
Yeah. So I've been recently doing it all started with the conversation at my local school about, why we call classes in CTE electives, and the idea was, and I don't know why. I mean, I can guess why, but I know the result is that when you call these classes electives, it sets up this barrier that they are less than, that not as important because they're not mandatory. And then, we've kind of stripped students of autonomy, letting them pick classes. And this is not just, I love my school. This is not my school. This is just in general.
Yep.
Right. So the kids have the mentality of, if it were important, they would have picked it for me. Right. We don't let these kids go through and plot their own course. We do. I mean, to some extent they can, but not really with any legitimate autonomy. So I've been thinking through this since that conversation. I'm doing some research to write just a couple of articles on LinkedIn. And so one is looking at what it means to be, why do we call these courses elective courses? Another one is, as I can't remember if I talked about it when I was on with you last time or not, but the fight that I always tend to pick with the moniker college and career ready, it really bothers me. Because again, even when people come in and try to include career people in this moniker, they do so by setting up this false hierarchy, and it's like college and career. And the thing that really bothers me is that, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never met one person who retired from college ever. Like, so even if you go to college, that is a means into your career, right? But the whole moniker college and career ready, it raises up college as this idol of being the goal, and it's not the goal. How many kids get there and they're like, this is what I worked so hard for?
Yeah.
And retention rates in colleges are going down. And so I mean, it's just so these all this stuff I'm wanting to write about. So I'm doing some research, and I'm really passionate about economic development, and that's a big part of what we do as work-based learning coordinators and directors is training workforce development to go out in the community and build economic development. We talked a lot about that on the last podcast, like the why I generate and calculate so many economic numbers to communicate to stakeholders. So I'm talking to ChatGPT, and it's weird because I treat it like it's my assistant,
I
right?
think you
I'm
were
just like,
yelling. I think you were
yeah,
yelling. I'm just
eventually I didn't
saying.
start off that way. It
You
didn't
can.
start off that way. But so I treat him like my assistant. I'm like, hey, can you do some research? Find me this. Is there, do you see any patterns here? And then it gives me just some ideas to go in. And so I asked him the question, and I was asking him, basically I said, when students graduate from college, they have a degree, and they end up getting a position that doesn't require that 4-year degree, is it still prominent to call that underemployed?
Mhm.
And he gives me like this whole list, and start reading it, start getting frustrated, and I have it somewhere. I don't want to just to hijack the episode, but
Mhm.
basically he talks about yes, this is a prevailing term inside of labor statistic analysis when looking at labor, and it's designed to measure when people are not utilizing their full potential or education in the workforce.
Yeah.
And that really didn't sit well with me. Like it really didn't sit. So what started out as research really turned into like frustration. And I'm sitting here in my office, like had to get up and shut my door because I'm like yelling at Chat GPT while I type, and I'm like, you are wrong. This is so condescending. Why would you tell me that? And so as we go through this, it's a creative
Oh man,
instrument, so it learns. And so we're talking, and I was like, hey, I need you. I think I sent y'all in the text thread.
you did.
Finally he acquiesced and was like, yes, you're right, this is condescending. It sets up this, our culture is biased towards academia. And again, I'm not anti-academia. I
Right.
don't want anyone to think that. I have spent my entire life in the academic setting. I'm pursuing a terminal degree. I love academia,
Hmm.
but I needed that for my career.
Yeah.
But to say that if I get my doctorate and want to go be a missionary, or I want to go be a welder, how dare you call me underemployed? It strips it, and I guess this is really everything in education. It strips individuals, students, from being able to make their own decision.
Hmm.
It strips them from being able to read these economic trends, right?
Yep.
How dare you tell me I'm underemployed when I can't get a job with a degree that I earned, because colleges have saturated the market with 4-year degrees, and there's this oversupply and economic trend,
Hmm.
and under demand, because there's too many degrees to go around. So yeah, a lot of these students are having to go back to trade school and become a welder or a cosmetologist or something, because the 4-year degree they got,
It's
whether
not
they
good.
earned it through a scholarship or paid for it or went into debt for it, it is not paying the bills.
Right.
And so yeah, I was Chat GPT, and we were on a hiatus at the moment. I won the
Taking a
argument.
break.
I won the argument, and then I was like, came back to him a few minutes later, and I was like, it was funny because you can start new chats,
Right.
and I said, hey, look, I want you to help me come up with some article names for this article I'm writing. I said, do you remember our previous conversation? And he was like, yes, I do, Jason. It was
Put an
funny.
unhappy face.
Yeah. Yeah, no emojis yet. If he starts doing that, it'll really be funny. But yeah, that's kind of where it is. And it really boils down to this. Words do matter. Words do matter. When you tell someone, or there is a prevailing overarching like word that we use that's so condescending, like underemployment, like that tells you where our culture and society's emphasis is.
Hmm.
And then you get into things like college and career readiness, where we're setting up college as the goal, not a means or a conduit to reach that goal.
Hmm.
And then we tell people these are elective classes. Like everything in our educational, or the trad educational system, everything there is set up to favor academia, and to belittle or handicap or kneecap, or however you want to call that,
Hmm.
our career at tech ed. And so that's something I will bang the gong and do whatever I can to draw attention to. And I don't think it's always intentional. I think it's just some
Hmm.
people have bought into what we have always done, and
Right.
people aren't willing to step up and just ask why.
Yeah.
That's why I love your podcast. It's just like you're always asking why. Like, why are we doing this? Why do you do this? So yeah, that was my morning this morning was
Love it.
going through that.
Well, we brought you back because, I mean, one, you have all of these, great ideas around how to disrupt education. You're deep in the work. And then also, just so people know, Jason is always like, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. And it's like it's so contagious. And we love guests like yourself, which is why we, bringing you back so
Well,
soon.
thank you.
And we
Thank you.
decided to kind of continue the series that we did in the winter into the spring and just continue to dive into like how do we set education on fire? How are
Yeah.
the people who are in the system doing that work? And semantics and culture, like
Mm,
it does matter.
yeah.
When I'm around teenagers, like they don't know what they don't know. They see like, oh, these are the graduation requirements to your point of like, okay, I need this many years of English, this many years of math, social studies, I need a
Mm,
health course, I need uh some arts, and then at the bottom, at the very bottom, also placement, right? I need X number of electives depending on,
Hmm.
your state
yeah.
and the
Yeah.
requirements. Well, I just think that those are opportunities, right? Simple opportunities to disrupt education. And then we've had other guests on who have talked about like, okay, maybe you need 4 years of English, but do you need English 9, English 10, English 11,
Hmm.
and English 12?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, why can't you have, I don't know,
Yeah.
career readiness as an English class?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
And so Georgia does some of that. Georgia, I'm proud of my state. Although we do have CCRPI, which is our performance index, it's our accountability metric for schools. Again, my disdain for that term is probably is very real. But I am proud because we do some of that stuff. We accept some of our healthcare classes as a fourth science. We accept some of our food nutrition classes as a fourth science, some of our draft. I mean, so there's a lot of things like that. And we even have this really unique program that's called accelerated graduation, where if it's a student who's like, I don't want to go to college, they come in, they take their core classes, and then they dual enroll. And when they get that done, basically we're just flipping the credits. And basically, once they earn a degree or diploma at Wiregrass, that's the equivalent. Then, or Wiregrass again, it's our technical college in
Hmm.
Valdosta. But a student basically they come, they take their core classes, two in each area, like the bare minimum with what we need, and then they go over to the tech school and they dual enroll and they graduate, not having had to take all those classes that they don't need and will and have said, look, I just want to go weld or just want to go build houses. Like I don't need all that stuff.
Hmm.
And so we're giving some students starting to see again, I mentioned earlier, starting to see some of the people get some autonomy, but it's just not there yet. But having them be able to make those decisions for themselves versus just have this single line buffet with two entrees and this. Like no one wants to go to that kind of buffet. Like it's not appetizing. I want options, and these kids need options, and that's cool. You said something also about culture, and in my research, I came across this quote. It's not attributed to Peter Drucker, but they say that basically it was like combined from some of his teachings, and it was used by Mark Fields at Ford Motor Company a long time ago. And I love it. I want to get y'all's thought on it. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You've probably
Hmm.
heard that before.
Yep.
And that to me is where schools are really, really missing it. Because we talk about like so let's give it legs. I mentioned like the fact that we call these elective courses, right? Well, I mean, I sent you on our text thread like 10 options. We can call them something different. What about future ready courses? What about passion pursuits? Like that's a cool, but you can change the name. But if
Hmm.
the culture isn't going to support CTE, then the new name quickly becomes associated with the old name, which quickly inherits the devalued priorities of the old. So you have to have culture. So you can have all this strategy, and every school has a strategic plan. Every one of them has a strategic plan, but no one's focusing on the culture. So you can have all this great strategy, but culture is if the culture is toxic, that strategy goes out the window. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of what I'm wanting to write this write this series about on LinkedIn and put it out there is just say, man, words matter. Like the way you think matters. You can't say, oh, this is just too small. It's too small of a detail. It's all like semantics. I hear people say that all the time. It's just you're the king of semantics. I'm like, semantics matter, especially
Mhm.
to a kid who's coming. I'm asking them to choose my program. I've got to have all those bases covered, right? So, yeah, culture, man, I love it. Like culture. If I could be an expert in anything, I wish it could be culture. Like changing culture. Like
Right.
that's how you make things happen.
Let's go back to the term college and career, right?
Yeah.
So I hear you, and I really I am now like searching for a different way because here's what's going on in our school culture and our district, right? We are building skills and experiences and community into the curriculum. So we're kind of building it backwards, sort of. There
Yeah.
is the strategy is right. Okay,
Yeah.
I will say that what we are doing is we are adding those durable skills or whatever you want to call them into
Yeah.
coursework, and now we're starting to answer the
Great.
why of why do I need to know algebra? Why do I need to da da da? Right. So there's a training movement there. Do you
Hmm.
think like when you change something, I'm a rip the band-aid off kind of guy.
Do it. Do
Like,
it. Yeah.
let's go.
Hmm.
Um, for some reason, government isn't like that. Usually it's like, well, we're just going to use this college and career, and then we're
Yeah.
going to maybe, because it's so ingrained in maybe the parents, the families, the community that if I don't say college for
Hmm.
this education,
Yeah.
it's going to devalue the school
Hmm.
district, blah, blah, blah. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. One of my favorite things to say is that whenever you bring this new product to market, and I'm pretty sure I said it on our last episode, the biggest obstacle is education.
Hmm.
If I'm creating a new toothbrush, I'll be like, Allie, here's why this new toothbrush is better than the one you're currently using. And I've got to sell you on the benefits of this, right? Well, we have bought hook, line, and sinker this dichotomy that our trad educational system has in place. And it's academics in this box and everything else in this box,
Hmm.
right? And I think the good teachers and the good systems are trying to do their best to kind of merge those cultures and do some cross-curricular collaboration. Um, but I think when you bring those two types of products or those two types of things together, people have been exposed for forever to the college is the way to go. And again, I don't, you go back and you look at when that messaging started to happen, and it's really interesting. Go back and look at when that messaging started to happen. It was right as soon as the federal government started subsidizing student loans. That's when they started having that discussion of you got to go to college to be you got to go you got to be successful. When I was in school, it was college prep and
Hmm.
vocational. And that was it, right? There weren't pathways. It was just college prep and vocational. So as far as I can go back in my mind, there's been this dichotomy that's set up of academics here, everywhere else. So when you're trying to change the mindset of parents I mean, ultimately students are our stakeholders, but because they're minors, that defaults to the parent, right? The parent they're the guardians for our true stakeholders. So you've got to win both of them over. You can't just win the kid over. Sometimes that works and the kid goes and communicates to the parents, but you have to win over the parent too. And and so some of the ways that I've tried to do that, I can think of one example where I had a student who wanted to be an engineer, and he was we had looked he wanted to know his options in my program, and I said, hey man, let me explain something to you. I said, you can go to school to be an engineer, and I think that's a great option. Engineers are needed. I said, but you're going to have to leave our community to do that, which is great. There's lots of schools in Georgia. You can go to Kennesaw, Georgia Tech, or a lot of those other schools. I said, but let's look at your earning outcome. And so we walked through it. And I think at the time, like an entry level engineer was going to make like about, 75 or $80,000 after 4 years of college, with substantial college debt, right? I said, but did you know that I can place you at this facility where you can be a PLC or a personal logic control technician, right? That's basically it's entry level engineering stuff and coding. And it's like you can work there. You can go to our technical college as a mechatronics student, which is a blending of machining, engineering, and electricity, right? They merge those together. I said, and then you can actually progress in this job here. And if you decide ultimately after you've worked here as without a 4-year degree, if you say, hey, you know what? I really still want to be an engineer, then that program, mechatronics, transfers to Kennesaw State and your first year of engineering school is done, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, you haven't lost anything. I said, but you may find out that you love it and that you can make just as much money without any student loan debt.
Yep.
And you have 4 years extra earning potential because you're earning money versus accruing debt for the same 4 years. So it's almost kind of like I mean, this Pascalian, what they call that, the Pascalian wage actor, Blaise Pascal. He's arguing about God, and he's like, if you believe, if you believe in God and he's not real, you haven't lost anything. But if you don't believe in God and he is real, you've lost everything, right? It's the same thing with CTE. It's like if you go this route and you don't like it, you can still keep going and get your 4-year degree. But once you get that 4-year degree, like you that's not, I mean, you can still pivot to other careers, but it's like, why would you get a 4-year degree and have all that time in accrued debt and then come back to something that you don't need it for? Again, there's ways we can communicate that versus underemployment. But and that was a really important conversation with that student's parent,
Mm-hmm.
and brought that parent in, and they're like, yeah, I like this because if he still wants to go to college, he can go to college. The first year is taken care of at Kennesaw State. But if he likes this, he can stay here, work, make. I think it was a little bit less money, not much. But we also live in a smaller area, so that little bit less money equates to a whole lot more than having to live in Atlanta, where there's other schools. So that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have those conversations. And is it quick? No. It's not a quick process.
Yeah.
But you have that conversation, and then you leverage that conversation, that proof of concept, with the next parent and the next parent, and then eventually a program like yours or mine builds this, and it becomes this momentum where they say, hey, look, there are other options out there. But school systems are scared because they don't want to, I mean, for lack of a better word, they don't want to disrupt the system,
Mm-hmm.
right? The kids come in, the kids sit here, and you get the FTE, and you buy the equipment, and you roll it over. Doing something different is hard. It takes, I mean, you can do, it's like the teacher who has the same lesson plans from 25 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just a little bit of effort, you could spruce those up, put some new models in there, put some new quotes in there. But it's like, no, this works. Why am I going to change it? My kids have been passing this test for 20 years. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just this antiquated mindset of, I don't want to push the envelope. And
Right.
those are hard for people for me to work with, because I'm pushing. Like, even if it's going great, like, it can always
Even if
be a
it's
little bit better.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, take it up.
Pushing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what you're saying that I hadn't really considered before is it's almost like college is, the cart before the horse,
100%.
and it's getting people to realize that going CTE takes away nothing. And in fact, in the episodes before this, we had a teacher who's a shop teacher, Bobby Miller, and he said something similar. He said, it's tempting to set up your educational program and not change it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's tempting, right? You can insert, instead of educational program, it's tempting to set up your culture and not change it. It's tempting to set up your semantics and not change it. It's tempting to set up your structure, your partnerships, and not change them, not evaluate them. Like, you're like, oh, it's working, it's okay. Let's not rock the boat. It's not really leadership from that kind of a mindset. And then we also recently had Mark Covell on the podcast, and he is pro academia. He has a terminal degree as well, and in English. And we had him on, and he's like, I'm never going back to traditional K through 12 education after exposing it. What you're saying, one of the things I really just want to highlight here, and what you're saying about these pathways and the conversations that you're having, is like, you have a deep knowledge because of your role of what the community offers. And you talked extensively on our last podcast series that we did with you about, like, you have to have this pipeline for talent. And if you do not have it from beginning to end, you are raising up prospects, your talent, your
Mhm.
future, and sending them out to other communities, your competition. And like
Using
you,
your community's tax dollars
Mhm.
to build talent to send to somebody else. That
yeah,
that should make people who are fiscally responsible very angry. Why are our schools using our community's tax dollars to pay teachers' salary, to have these equipment, to have these labs and facilities where we don't have anyone in that community who's going to consume that talent? Like, I'm fine. I'm not saying the kid can't do that, but I'm saying, why do we have $1 million lab in a school when there's no industry in that community to consume the talent? That
Mhm.
is a problem. And people, you're right, Allie, people should be mad about it. They should be at the board office saying, this is my tax dollars. Why do we not have a program? Here's this new company that's come in. What's our plan to build a pathway to put our kids in the ability to go work for that community or in that facility or that manufacturing plant? Like, that's the kind of questions we need to be responsive to, these economic trends and motivators. And when communities come in or when communities leave, we should be nimble. But again, when people aren't asking those questions, it's easy to just keep it there. I mean, how many pathways? I mean, I don't know y'all's schools very well, but I mean, everybody can look at their school and say, oh, this pathway really, that's like I mentioned last time, the sacred cow. It's
Mhm.
it's a popular pathway.
Right.
And you want to be sensitive to the person who teaches that pathway. They are a person. There's always someone on the other end of these pathways that you're
mm,
getting rid of or sunsetting, if you want to be polite. Um, but yeah, it is your tax dollars resources building talent to send across a county border or a state border to now compete with you in the private marketplace. You built them, someone else is leveraging them.
Mhm.
right. So like I'm thinking, okay, the conversation that you had with the student, I'm sure you've had many others, to me sounded like a counselor. Like if like most kids would go
Mhm.
the traditional route, they're like, I've got a question about my future. I'm going to set an appointment with the counselor because that's who I go to, and I want to discuss my future. Are counselors trained in the type of exploration that you just discussed? Because I know plenty of counselors. There's sometimes one in a
Mhm.
school, sometimes there's one in a district that is the college and career focused counselor.
Yeah.
And I mean, I from what I understand, most of their
Mhm.
work is still geared towards college placement. That's their
Yeah.
go-to. It's right, it's college and career,
Yeah. It
not
is.
career
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
college if it requires it. So, does your school address this, or like is this a conversation worth exploring with counselors and
Oh
training
yeah.
counselors? What
Yeah.
are
I
your
mean, it's
thoughts?
definitely worth exploring. Again, I mean, so the counselors are one of the most important roles that I partner with in my job. Like, I can't do my job without counselors, so we work well together. But I do think there is, um, and it's the way they've been trained. Now we have a bunch of really good counselors who, when there are questions, they'll call me and say, "Hey, the student, I'm gonna send a student. You can talk to them." Um, but again, you've got counselors ultimately are responsible for doing what the students and parents want that student to do, right? And so that can be overcome with messaging, but messaging can't be stifled. So what I'm saying is that I am fine with the traditional model of how we do things, as long as both career and academics have the same amplified voice. But when you've got someone whose microphone's on 10 and I'm trying to compete with them and you've cut my volume to 3, like it's not equitable, if that makes sense. It's not the same. So but yes, counselors are valuable, and it's a struggle. It really is.
Mhm.
Um, our counselors work well with me. We do a really good job of working together when there's and they're all familiar with what we do, and they're all familiar with the what we talk about. Maybe a little bit a program that I love to use, Science. It really helps us uh, give that individual customized, college and career, even though I don't like that term, counseling for everybody. And they can point to that, look at that, research that, and send these kids, and the kids can go ahead and do that. So we have a law called the Bridge Bill in Georgia, which requires individualized career counseling for every student, and that's why we use Science for that. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough because there's a lot of pressure um, on these counselors and especially like a school like mine where we have a counselor and they have 500, 600 kids they're responsible for. we're 3,400 kids with 6 counselors. That's a lot. Like, so, I mean, so there is that pressure to just, this is the traditional route. And then that takes care of 3/4 of your kids. And then here are the ones, but our counselors do a really good job of pushing through that. I'm very close with all of them. And we work very well together, but, I've also have counterparts who do what I do at other schools whose counselors want nothing to do with career tech just because it's more work, right? It's another model. It's something else to learn, another option for the kids to have. It takes longer to counsel, takes longer to schedule, takes longer to get, excuse me, all that stuff done. It's challenging.
I think, along with that, we have a career counselor, and we have a room called the Park. So it's pathway, like after
Mhm.
school. I can't remember the acronym. There's too many acronyms in education.
Alphabet
But
soup.
right.
Yeah.
But they do that at each one of our schools. And then my counterpart and myself kind of do what you do, Jason, right? We're the internship coordinators. They do send students to us. We have certain pathways,
Yeah.
IT, healthcare, manufacturing, all these different pathways.
Mhm.
And they encompass pretty much everything. And the conversations that we have with students is pretty much similar to the one we're having here, right? Um, I can't tell you how many times we've had students in internships go out into the world, experience something, and then come back and say that was not
Mhm.
even close to what I thought it was. And that
Mhm.
is so powerful. I
Yeah.
can't, I mean, you know this, Jason. It's like so powerful. We had an IT student go out, and he worked in a coding firm and where they were teaching, and
Mhm.
it was kind of a coding camp thing. And he came back and he was like, "I'm going to be an electrician." And we're like,
Yeah.
"Great." Like,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
How much when we're talking about like the professional self and the academic self, I think they're the same. I think we should
Yeah.
go younger.
Mhm.
Because one of the biggest challenges that we have, and we're talking about juniors and seniors, so their 11th and or 12th year of their
Mhm.
traditional education path, um, are struggling. And I'm telling you, like, we have national merit scholars, we got great quote unquote academic kids.
Yeah.
um, they struggle with self-advocacy. They struggle
Yes.
with communication. They struggle with those skill sets
Yeah.
that every single one of our opportunities are telling us, um, I don't really care your technical knowledge. I don't really care about like if you know how to weld or whatever. I mean, they do in certain instances, but I will, if I have those skills, those durable skills, I can teach you, or we can get you into a program
Yeah.
through our blah blah blah, and we will help you
Mhm.
do that. What is your thought process on like the professional versus academic self? Should that be K through gray?
Yeah.
Should we start that eighth grade? I mean, I've heard a lot of different things. I mean, personally, I have my own opinions. I'm just wondering what yours are.
Well, I mean, I think so. I think there is a movement. I won't say it's new, but where you call it a comprehensive high school, right? You've
Hmm.
heard that. I think education should be comprehensive,
Yeah.
and I think education should be. I think whenever you segregate programs, and it's like, okay, you're the academic kids and you're the career tech kids, or you start locking kids in or I mean, I think it's detrimental to people. And so the academic self, again, it's really condescending. I mean, so you're telling me that a kid who is in construction, it can go out and build a one-car garage as his cumulative project. They can build a tiny house as a cumulative project that they don't know geometry. Like and it doesn't stop there. Like those are the really easy, the low-hanging fruits. But I remember one of my favorite activities when I was a classroom teacher in the business area, business education, is I was teaching a class called Computing in the Modern World, and we were going over evolution and technology. And we talked about how the phone, at the time, the iPhone had just come out, that where it went from having to enter your passcode to the fingerprint scanner, right? And so I was like, how can I make this a really cool assignment? So I called the history department and I was like, hey, when are y'all going over amendments in the Constitution and amendments? And they said, well, here's this. And I said, when are you going over the Fourth Amendment? And they're like, why? And I was like, because I want to do a collaborative lecture and where we answer the question, when the forefathers wrote the Fourth Amendment, did they envision a time where a dead person's fingerprint could be used to unlock their phone. Is that a violation of the, so that's like, why can't we do more of that stuff?
Right.
Where we're taking these and then we're pushing these kids together, and we're letting them, whether the one kid needs to embrace both the academic and that career self, or we're taking kids who are firmly entrenched in each camp and we're switching them and letting them share, letting them see, having teach. I mean, that to me is, again, it's pie in the sky. I know, like logistically, that would be really difficult. It would be hard to do, but I don't think anyone benefits from being in silos. I think everywhere else you see in business, you're trying to destroy silos, get out of silos. In education, man, we are nice and comfortable in our silo, and we don't want to push past that. And it's like, who's really being downgraded in that effort is the potential outcome for students, because I agree with you. Self advocacy is a big deal. That's why I created that event called the Reverse Career Fair. We talked about that. Social capital is a big deal. That's why being able to advocate and develop these networks. That's why work-based learning is such a big deal, because you're taking students who don't have any social capital and they're exposing them to social capital while they're learning, career and refined career skills. Um, if I had my druthers, I would say that those things need to be combined and we need to quit isolating them. That we can teach, you can teach some construction and some technology and some CTE standards in your academics, and you can teach some academic standards in your CTE, and you could have, would it be hard? Yeah, but schools are doing it. Why are we scared of work? Why are we scared of work? Why are we scared to sit down and rewrite a unit, or to sit down and do something different? The best lessons I've learned as an educator are when I've done something and it didn't work, right? And it's like, well,
Yep.
I tried. And then you can come back and you can say, like I said, that reverse career fair, like that hadn't been done really before. And I was like, this is either going to be awesome, or people are going to laugh at me,
Mhm.
but it worked. And it was something that we leverage now every single semester for our kids, and our industry likes it. So it's now standard practice for my school, where 3 years ago it wasn't. That's the fruit of combining those efforts
Mhm.
and trying to do new things and give students the ability to acquire every single skill set they need to be successful. And I think that happens when you merge the academic and the career self.
Yep.
As someone who was very academically bent, I don't know, whatever word, I was, a superstar academic, it all through college, master's program, what have you. Um, you know, I would be considered currently one of those underemployed, right? I'm not doing what my
Mhm.
original certificate says, right? Currently a skydiving instructor. I do a bunch of other things, but right, if we were to like paint the picture of that headline, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting about like just everything that we're talking about here with self-advocacy and pathways and skill sets, and like you can go a route and change, and you can pursue different passions, and that's just
Hmm.
called life. Like
100%.
I
Yeah.
don't know why the stakes are so high, or they feel so high, right? Like we talked on the last podcast about, education is quote unquote a safe space, and when you do something to disrupt it and make it quote unquote feel unsafe, people get riled up. They have feelings about this. And I wonder if lowering the stakes, so to speak, like you can just try stuff, you
Yeah.
can gain skills,
Oh yeah.
and you might try something
Yeah.
and it's okay.
Hmm.
And I think for students that would also help, because one of the things that I see is in Gen Z and Gen Alpha is that the self-advocacy piece is like almost this fear of like, am I going to choose wrong?
Hmm.
Am I going to say something wrong?
Yeah.
Like they still are learning how to communicate, and putting them in, safe spaces to quote unquote learn, fail, grow, etc., and engage in
Yeah.
real things like the reverse career fair, I think are like they're so needed, because the traditional system is not working, right? If you're seeing Peter and you're
Yeah.
seeing Jason, like these students that are great academic students, but
Yeah.
yet they're not advocating, they're not communicating at a level that matches their test scores, then like what is education doing for them?
And I mean, I think it's so the distinction I wanted to make when I did that event was I understand that at this point they don't have those skills. And I understand that at some point they're going to acquire those skills as a professional, because at some point we all acquire those skills. But a lot of us have acquired those skills by taking a couple of black eyes in the process.
Yep.
Like we bombed an interview and then we said, I can't do that again, right? It was embarrassing. And so so to me, and some people look at me crazy when I say this, education to me should be about developing an environment where kids can fail in a safe space, pushing them to failure. And we don't push our kids to failure. We coddle them. We like exemptions in your academic. Why do we have exemptions? Why do we have exemptions? It's stupid. You know why we have exemptions? Because it makes it easier on teachers to put grades in before we graduate.
Yep.
That's the only reason we have exemptions. And people say, well, no, it's about motivating people to come to school. I don't care. I don't care if you come to school. If you can make a 90 on my test, you make a 90 on my test. I don't care. I don't care how much you come to school, right? I mean, I do, obviously, but tongue in cheek. Why do we have exemptions? You know what I'm hearing from students who come back, and some of my good friends whose kids are in college, they come back and they said, I don't know how to take a high wage or high skill test. I don't know how to do it because I never did it in high school because I was so smart that I didn't have to take one in high school. And I get to college and you can't exempt your finals, and I don't know how to take this really leveraged high stakes test. So it's the same thing, Alli. It's the same thing. We're coddling these students. We need to teach them and push them to failure and be there to say, here's how you do it better the next time. But that requires different grading practices. It requires different units. It requires communication with parents, and it's for a lot of people, it's just too hard. It's just too hard.
Yeah.
We might have to, disrupt this. We haven't gotten to half of.
So here's what I love this because I think we're gonna wrap up this part of the episode now, and then when we shift to next week, I think we go into what are some strategies that we think would work? What are different ways that we've already talked about the reverse career fair and other things. I do have some things that I can share about the experiences that my interns have gone through and what they have talked about. That I think is going to be where we're going to go on our next episode. So we're gonna cut it right here because there's just too much. There's too much awesomeness. So, and you're probably, everybody listening to this on their morning commute are probably almost there. So anyway, we'll be back next week with Jason. Hang out with us because now we're going to go into results. So we'll see you next week. Thank you for hanging out on the Disrupt Education podcast. For Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrasser, and Jason. He'll be back next week. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on this episode of the Disrupt Education podcast. Let's keep the momentum going. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode out.
If you want to dive deeper into disrupting education, visit our website at disrupteducationpodcast.com.
Here's the bottom line. We believe real change in education starts locally. It happens when communities come together to rethink learning. If you're an educator, school leader, or organization looking to take action towards real change in education, we are here to help. Reach out and connect.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. So drop us a line wherever you listen. And until next time, take that bold step beyond your comfort zone. Challenge the status quo and be the change education truly needs.
Because at the end of the day, education isn't just about subjects. It's about students. And when we dare to disrupt, the future of learning is waiting.